thanks for having me, and thank you everyone for your time today and for being here. So we've heard from a lot of great solutions so far, and my goal here in this next 20 minutes or so that I have is to really clarify our specific approach to data protection here at Infrascale and to address the aspects of our solution that are unique to us and that differentiate us. So before we take a look at the agenda, I do want to take a quick moment to note what you see on your screen here. So just last month in 2017, June of 2017, Gartner named us a leader in their DRaaS Magic Quadrant. So if you'd like a copy of that, please just use the question tool there. Let me know that you'd like a copy of that report, and I'll get that sent over to you. All right, so let's dive in here. So taking a look at the agenda, first we're just going to talk about data protection in 2017, a few of the trends that we've seen. Then we're going to talk about the difference between backup and DRaaS, and then we'll talk about the specific Infrascale solution, and then we have a Q&A that will come too. So let's start by looking at some of the data protection issues that a business will come up against, and these are the threats to business continuity that Infrascale addresses. So we address data loss of files and folders, data hijacking like ransomware, and then business downtime, so having systems and servers go down. And all these threats can come in many different forms, right? So looking at some of the specifics, the threats to business continuity don't just end at what we saw, those three issues. But the use cases for data protection extend to a variety of issues. It could be ransomware. It could be natural disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods. Just human error and users that make mistakes, and that's just human error. Those micro disasters, things that come into play like power outages, brownouts, just spilled coffee. OS upgrades, software upgrades, migrating to the cloud, so the lift and shift, compliance mandates, regulatory frameworks, anything from lost laptops or stolen laptops, and then just peace of mind, needing to know that your data is protected, right? So regardless of the use case or the cause, to this day, we still have lots of companies that are losing data. If we look at data protection by the numbers, and take a look at some of these stats, they're really staggering figures here. Only 10% of businesses survive after a severe outage. That's the last stat that you see along the bottom of the screen there. And 54% of businesses still struggle on how to deal with data protection for mobile devices. The first stat that we look at the top there, 40 seconds, every 40 seconds another company is hit with ransomware. So that's a really specific use case that I want to talk about just for one moment here, because with ransomware, this is a really particular threat to business continuity, and we've all seen the headlines. So we've seen those strains like Locky, WannaCry, NotPetya. The growing problem with ransomware is the introduction of ransomware as a service. So this is now making ransomware accessible to anyone. It's really lowered the barrier to entry, right? And when it comes to cybercrime now, almost anyone can get their hands on it. And then we see organizations paying the ransom. So the ransomware quietly works itself into a system, and then the business just quietly pays the ransom and moves on. But why are they paying that ransom? First, we kind of see that in a lot of cases, often just the data wasn't backed up, or maybe the backups were too old, and this is just a traditional backup and recovery model. Or maybe the recovery attempt failed because there was no testing, and so there were no valid backups or any usable backups. And then we often see as well that the time it takes to recover is often going to be more costly than the ransom itself. So in essence, the whole process is just broken. If it takes 4 days to recover data and it only costs $1,000 to release the ransom, maybe that's seen as the best option, right? So that's what they do. Quite often the company will pay the ransom knowing that it would take longer and be more costly because of all of the downtime involved to try to recover from a previous backup. So what that tells us is that the traditional approaches to backup and recovery, they just don't work against ransomware. And that's when DRaaS comes into play. So DRaaS is Disaster Recovery as a Service, just to be sure that we're all on the same page with that. DRaaS is going to replicate and protect your entire environment, not just files and folders. So you can really quickly fail over your entire systems, ensure uptime, and ensure availability when something goes wrong, like any of those disaster use cases that we just saw, or any ransomware attack. But what I want to talk about specifically, because there are many different ways to define a DRaaS solution, right? You have various ways to back up and recover critical systems and data. Organizations all have different security and compliance requirements. And then there are different levels of flexibility in backup targets, in recovery options, and lots of companies have the need to control the failback procedures, control orchestration policies. So there's a lot that comes into play. And I'm going to talk specifically about how Infrascale DRaaS works and what items are important to take into consideration when you're selecting a DRaaS provider. And again, you don't need to take my word for it, but like I mentioned, we were named a 2017 leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. So everything that I'm sharing with you has been vetted and verified by Gartner. Okay, let's take a look then at the difference between backup and DRaaS, just sort of a quick comparison, be sure we're all on the same page here. So when we're dealing with any type of disaster or ransomware threat, you know time's your worst enemy. And the faster you can detect it, the more time you have to then take action and restore your databases and mission-critical apps. So simple backup procedures are going to take significantly longer than a DRaaS solution. Let's look at the top when we see the backup scenario. The total downtime, this is a best-case scenario, is 4 to 5 hours. And part of that reason is, take a look at all of the planning and coordination that's needed. If you have a backup system, you need to find a clean point from which to restore, then get the hardware to recover, set up the machine, recover the data, test it for viability. Look at all these steps that are involved. If it's not viable, you have to go back and start over before restoring to production. But if you have a DRaaS system, look along the bottom here, the screen in red, you can simultaneously cloud boot multiple versions of the same machine, and that way determine a safe version to recover and boot either to the cloud, a virtual environment, or recover to production hardware. Your total downtime here is 1 to 2 minutes. So that's saving you a ton of time and money because of the simplicity of these steps. And the Infrascale DRaaS solution includes built-in failover orchestration, which lets you create predetermined failover plans. We're going to look at that in just a second. But that way, it can be scheduled to boot either simultaneously or in a specific order. And again, we'll look at that in just a moment. But rather than just talking through the solution, I want to give you a specific example here. So here are some end users just working on their production systems. And in this scenario, here in this situation, we are going to install the Infrascale Disaster Recovery Solution. So it's a hybrid cloud solution here. We have an on-premise failover appliance, and that's installed locally. Might be a virtual appliance or physical appliance. And then a cloud-based service, like would run on any public or private cloud. So next we'll capture the systems, we'll capture them to the appliance, we'll dedupe them to compress the amount of data that's stored, and then replicate those systems up to the cloud. And now you have 2 copies of those systems, one locally on the appliance, and then one centrally located on the cloud. So in this scenario, here is a system outage or a ransomware attack. If just one system were to go down, then here the administrator could fail over to the local appliance, bring back the most recent point or replica of that system, and then you can see the end users continue working with that application or that server. But let's assume instead that there's a site-wide infection or attack. So the local appliance is no longer available either. But that's okay. Here we still use the same steps, and we can roll back to a clean environment and fail over to the cloud. So here we bring up the full virtual environment. It replicates exactly what was on premise. And now the users simply continue working by interacting with those cloud-based systems. And so we do this by we have two solutions, Infrascale Cloud Backup and Infrascale Disaster Recovery. Just to understand the difference between the two, Cloud Backup is a direct-to-cloud solution. So this is oriented more around data and bare metal image backup, typically for endpoint data protection, laptops, tablets, mobile devices. And it's optimized for small to medium businesses. And then we also have Infrascale Disaster Recovery. So this is the hybrid cloud solution that we just saw. It includes that on-premise component as well as the cloud. So of course you can back up your data, but with Infrascale Disaster Recovery, it goes a step further, capturing full system images and allowing you to boot and run those images on a local appliance or in the cloud. And we've already done all the work behind the scenes in order to prepare those images and ensure that they're able to run in the cloud, even though they were originally installed and running on a local physical server. Now, we go one step further, and we've introduced anomaly detection. So this comes into play specifically with ransomware as well. Now, what it is and how anomaly detection works is that we're monitoring backup activity. We're looking at all of the patterns in data change, and we're taking stock of how frequently that data is changing. We know that when ransomware gets into your system, it starts with the older files, and it modifies all the files that it touches. So in this analysis that we're doing, in this change rate analysis, we're monitoring the normal number of changed files. And if we suddenly see a spike where a much larger number of files has been changed, like you see on the right here, that spike, then that's when the alert's released. And this is really important. This is critical because from here you can proactively see the threat of data encryption before the ransom is ever posted or ever demanded. And most solutions out there today will say, okay, well, we can't detect it, but we can try to remediate it afterward. Now, this is really critical here because we do both. We can detect it and remediate it. And if we want to look at the specifics of the process, here we have Infrascale Cloud Backup and Infrascale Disaster Recovery, those two solutions that we just saw. And this is at a high level, but from the bottom up, we're kind of seeing how the process works from each of these systems. So that first layer, we're seeing the source system that we're trying to protect. It could be Windows, Linux, Unix systems, VMware, Hyper-V. And then in either case here, in the case of virtual environments with VMware, you have a direct connection to their API. In the case of Hyper-V, you'd have a host level or hypervisor level agent. And then we capture those systems. So in the case of Cloud Backup, we dedupe the data and directly send it to the cloud of your choosing, right? You can see here the Infrascale cloud or a private cloud or a third-party cloud. And in the case of DR, we capture those systems to the on-premise appliance like we just saw. We dedupe there, and then we replicate that data to the cloud. So then you have those two copies. Everything is administered through a centralized web-based dashboard. So you can log into that dashboard from any browser, even if you're on a laptop or a tablet or a smartphone. And that's really critical because we know disasters can happen at any point in time. So if it's 2 a.m. on a Saturday and you're asleep, but you get a call that this disaster is hit or a ransomware attack is come through, you get those alerts, and you can access everything from even a tablet sitting on your nightstand, right? Now, I mentioned briefly a moment ago orchestration, but I wanted to come back to that to talk about the specifics. This is one of the key differentiators in any DRaaS solution provider out there. So you want to ask these questions of how do you deliver orchestration? You need the orderly recovery of your server environment. So the orchestration is going to ensure that all those critical servers and applications and devices come online in the proper sequence, and it's all based off of the other dependencies. So what we released is this visual designer that you can see here for drag and drop orchestration. And this is right within our dashboard under our Boot tab. So you see this orchestration page, you'll have a list of all the bootable machines along the side, and you can just drag them over into the diagram design surface. You can rearrange them there. You can add wait times so that you can add delays between boots. You can create different boot groups. And so that way, if some machines are more critical than others and you want to separate them, you have full control over this. So again, no matter what DR solution you choose, it's really important to understand exactly how they plan to fail over your applications and then fail back, in addition to how much control you have and how much customization you have in this whole orchestration process. All right. Talking a little bit more specifically about the Infrascale guarantee. Our mission at Infrascale is to eradicate downtime and data loss. So it's a really simple mission, really straightforward, and we're doing this with a 15-minute failover guarantee, and that's something that nobody else in the industry can currently offer. And what's also interesting about our specific approach is that proactive warning system that I just showed you with anomaly detection, or that we saw a few moments ago. But as far as the specifics, let's take a look at exactly what we support. Now, we protect any device, anything from laptops, tablets. We protect Windows and Mac, mobile devices like iPhones, Androids. We include MDM functionality as well, like geolocate, remote wipe. And this includes servers, both physical and virtual servers. A bit more on the specifics here. We support physical servers running Windows, Unix, Linux, and we support virtual servers on VMware, Hyper-V, KVM. We support more than 100 different versions of operating systems. So this is really the broadest support footprint that you'll find in the industry today. And I briefly mentioned, but I'll touch on it more specifically, the recovery targets. We support any cloud or a prepackaged appliance as well. So you can use one of Infrascale's 15 global data centers, or you can use your own private cloud or third-party clouds. So our software is going to run with AWS, Google Cloud, IBM, Windows, so any third-party cloud as well. And I know we have a lot to cover, so apologies that I'm going quickly through everything here. For those of you wondering about data privacy and security, this is a look at our encryption system. We do take security very seriously, so your data is encrypted at 256-bit AES locally. It's sent over an SSL, and then it's encrypted again at 256-bit AES. You can take it another step further with our UltraSafe Max option as well. And then when it comes to compliance and certification, all of our data centers comply with HIPAA, SSAE 16, FINRA, SOX, CGIS, but this isn't and many other regulations as well. So this isn't the entire list. All of our data centers are Tier 3 and Tier 4 military grade. If you are subject to any regulatory frameworks, just make sure that the vendor you choose has that compliance factor built in. So again, this isn't a comprehensive list, just some of the examples. to give. Now, I wanted to cover that Gartner mention that I made in a little bit more detail, because our approach really is getting a lot of attention. So in 2015, we were named a Gartner Cool Vendor in Business Continuity and Disaster Recovery. In 2016, we were named a Gartner Visionary, and in 2017, we were named a Leader. So you can see we're gaining a lot of momentum. And if you just joined in now, or you're joining in a little bit late in the presentation, everything that I shared about our solution has been verified and vetted by Gartner. And so you don't have to take my word for it, but you can listen to the experts, right? Now, when you are considering any solution, whether it be InfraScale or whoever you do decide to go with, there's a lot of criteria that you want to take into consideration. So these are just a couple of the critical sort of issues that you want to keep in mind, right? Consider what types of workloads do you need to protect. Most DRaaS solutions will protect virtual environments, but not all workloads are virtualized. So you want a solution that can protect physical workloads too. When it comes to recovery, this is recovery speed. We know that time is essential for continuity. So how quickly can your vendor restore operations and spin up critical VMs? Orchestration, we just took a look at our orchestration policies and procedures, and this is really critical. You need those servers, applications, and their dependencies all to come online in the right order. Consider support. So when you need that support, when it actually comes into play that a disaster happens, when it actually matters the most, do you have that vendor there? Do they have 24/7 support? Where is it located? And do they charge additional fees for declaring a disaster? So these are all critical components as well. And I'll just wrap up with the last few here. Taking a look at the target, this means the replication target, the flexibility to use the vendor's cloud, your own private cloud, or those third-party clouds. And then fail back when it comes to restoring operations after they've been shifted to a temporary DR location. During that failover, right, you need to then understand how any changes in data during the DR event are going to be tracked and then the original restored properly. And then the last two criteria, take a look at testing. The most important thing is to test your service frequently. So there's no point in having a solution if it doesn't work for you when you need it. So you want to make sure that they stick to a regular testing schedule, because you never know when a disaster is going to strike, and you've got to be prepared. And then lastly, of course, take a look at the cost. So depending on the vendor, all of these criteria become additional costs to the overall price tag. You want to factor in activation fees, professional services, support, DR testing, disaster events, ongoing maintenance. There are so many things to take into consideration. Now, the InfraScale solution is a simple subscription-based solution. You only pay for the amount of data that you protect. We don't have any additional costs for support, for declaring a disaster, for recovering from disaster. Nothing else is added on. All right. So I know that was a lot of information in a very short period of time. Apologies for going through so quickly, but I wanted to share my email with you, and I'm happy to talk to any of you further. You can email me at carla.federigo@infrascale.com with any specific questions that maybe we don't have time to answer today, or that you want to discuss further, and I'd love to chat with you. We do have one poll that we're going to launch here, and then we are going to dive into the Q&A now.
Yeah, Carla, let me go ahead and pop up that poll question. I've got it on the screen there. It says, would you like to learn more about disaster recovery as a service from InfraScale? So those are the choices on the screen, and I'll just go ahead and leave that up while we do. If you don't mind, maybe we can do some kind of rapid-fire Q&A, because I know that we're running a little late here on the schedule.
Yes, apologies. I'm sorry about that. And everyone on the line, we have our expert senior sales engineer on the line. His name is Brian. So any technical questions that you have, please do get those into the Q&A, and we'll do that rapid fire now.
Awesome, awesome. So first question here is, does your pricing include the cost of the appliance, and what about support and DR testing if you want to test it?
Sure. So the product is a subscription model, and that subscription model actually does include the appliance. There's basically two costs associated. There's an upfront cost, kind of like, per terabyte cost for the local device, and then there's a monthly subscription. So it's all included, including the support as well. If you want to fail over on a daily basis, you have the ability to fail over on a daily basis if you want to. We have no restrictions on how many times you can fail over, how many times you can test it, so on and so forth.
Okay. And what about endpoint protection? Is that included?
So endpoint protection is part of both products, technically speaking. Because the DRaaS model is per terabyte and the direct-to-cloud model is also per terabyte, pretty much everything is included, including endpoint protection. The only thing that would not be included would be like granular recovery for Exchange.
Got it, got it. And what about different clouds? Is there an InfraScale cloud and then there's other clouds, or how does that work?
Yes, so there's three different types of cloud that we can theoretically target. There is the InfraScale cloud, which is by far the most popular because of the orchestration feature that Carla mentioned earlier. There's also public cloud entities such as Google, Amazon, and there's also the ability to work with private clouds, like a data center you might have a partnership with. You can purchase two appliances and set up your own cloud replication to their secondary site for yourself.
Got it, got it. And then what about, does it include the cost of the appliance as well, the hardware?
Right, so that's what the upfront fee covers. The upfront fee covers the cost of the appliance that goes on site. So if you tell us you have 10 terabytes of data, we'll charge you for that 10 terabytes of data upfront, and that gets the box on premise, and then you start your monthly subscription for replicating information to the cloud for disaster recovery purposes.
Got it. And then what about the different levels of encryption? Can you control that?
So for that, I would say there's really only one level of encryption that we offer, and it's basically the highest level of encryption that we offer, which is the AES-256. Now, there is SSL encryption for in-transit data, but at-rest data is AES-256.
Got it, got it. And why support anything less than the best? And then what about let's see, what about the ransomware protection? Did I understand it right that you can actually detect when a ransomware attack is happening?
Right. So our anomaly detection feature tracks change rates as well as growth rates. And so what that allows us to do is preset up a threshold. And if that threshold is crossed, that is usually a good indication that a ransomware attack may have occurred. And we can lock down the specific timing of that attack and move ourselves to isolating that device and making sure that we begin the recovery process for that device from the backups that we're storing.
Got it, got it. Okay. Well, I think that's all the time we have for questions, but there's a lot of questions left there in the queue for you if you don't mind checking those out. Great presentation, Carla. Thank you.
Thank you.